Hey, you are joining the Cover One Fantasy Show. I am one of your three amigos, Greg Tompsett, joined by Anthony Prohaska and Rich Haynes. Anthony, how we doing tonight?
I'm doing good. We're doing the Friday shows again for the fantasy show, and there's some college football starting tonight. There's more important college football tomorrow, thus my second night in a row wearing my Ed Reed Miami Hurricanes jersey in full support of the U before things potentially don't work out tomorrow against Alabama. But it's exciting. I've said this on so many shows, like once training camp started and then the preseason started, and now the weather's dropped a little bit in Buffalo. It's also made me feel not so great, but we got a little fall tinge in the air. We got real college football starting. The NFL season's about to start. We're in the final weekend of fantasy football draft season and draft weekends. There's a lot of energy and excitement in the air, and I am equally energetic and excited. Also, I got a haircut today, and it doesn't look as good as yours, but I mean, I'm kind of proud of it, so that's also fun.
Rich, how are you doing this fine evening?
I'm doing excellent as well. Not a lot on tap actually for Labor Day weekend, other than a bunch of important fantasy football drafts. So maybe might try to tackle Oktoberfest here in Cleveland. We'll see if I can get there tomorrow. But yeah, a bunch of fantasy football drafts. Excited for all those. I'm back on. I haven't had a cocktail on the show for a while, so I'm actually my birthday. This was a gift from I believe Ted. Little nice. Lakewood, Ohio bourbon, Western Reserve. I know it's no Uncle Jumbo's, but one of your other sponsors, which I still need to try. Right, they have the whiskey or the bourbon now.
They're it's getting ready. They're doing a bourbon. That's
I need a bottle of that. I want to definitely check that out. But yeah, just hanging out on Friday, getting ready for my drafts. I had a big Football Guys Player Championship FFPC draft last night that maybe we'll get into a little bit tonight, and excited to kind of talk for a few minutes, do some Q&A, and talk some fantasy football.
Yeah, along that note, for those listening, send us your questions in the comment section. We've already got a bunch queued up from our AskCover1 hashtag on Twitter, so we'll be getting to those. But any questions you guys have in the chat, come and let us know. We will get to all of them, whether you're getting ready for your final draft. As Rich said, this weekend I have a draft tomorrow, 2 on Sunday, 3 on Monday, and 2 on Tuesday. So I've got a heavy draft weekend coming here. Looking forward to the ones I care the most about are coming up here. So really excited to be able to get those rolling here. But let us know your questions. We'll fight through some of those. And yeah, the one that Rich is holding in his hands will be held at my house on Monday, on Labor Day. Coming here, really looking forward to seeing everybody. Last year, obviously, with everything going on, was our first ever fully remote draft. And this year, although not everybody can get together, almost everybody is back here in person. And looking forward to getting that back to some sense of normalcy. So tonight's show is going to be, going through some of the questions we've got, some of the ones that we get here, and kind of, obviously not a ton of news. There weren't any more games since the last time we talked. Cut down day, there was maybe a couple little surprises. I don't know, from a news standpoint, we saw, I don't know, maybe Wayne Gallman technically is kind of a newsy thing. There, only because so many people were grasping at who is the Mike Davis handcuff. I was on the Javian Hawkins train for a while.
You don't need one. He's playing 100% of the snaps this year. I don't know why we're entertaining this.
I don't even understand.
I'm actually surprised Javian got cut. I thought,
I liked him a lot.
That was weird. He seemed like he had that niche, third down, 5 to 7 catch role, and then strangely got cut. And then they bring in Wayne Gallman, who, he's had some nice kind of performances in relief in his career, whether it's with the Giants or whatever. But I mean, I don't really find him a special back. You would think maybe because that team is probably going to struggle a little bit this year, that they would have, opted to maybe see what they have in Javian instead of bringing in a vet. But maybe they feel that, hey, Mike Davis needs a traditional kind of true backup running back, that can maybe do more work than
he's certainly more that style of, hey, who could step into somewhat of a Mike Davis role, whereas Hawkins was obviously more of a, change of pace. Quadri Allison, some people liked him. Even technically Cordell Patterson people were throwing around. So that was a little bit newsy. Jacob Hollister got picked up by the Jaguars, who honestly didn't really have a tight end on their roster. It was people like Chris Manhertz and like some odd guys in that role. They have a pretty deep wide receiver group in Jacksonville. I actually like Colin Johnson got cut. I actually kind of liked him, but they have, people debate Laviska Shenault and DJ Chark and Marvin Jones and, pretty solid depth there. But I don't think it's out of the question that Jacob Hollister could start for them. Were there any other moves on cut down day that struck you guys or that, it will ripple in anything from a fantasy standpoint?
I have one that I don't know that it's not necessarily a large wave, but it may create a little bit of a ripple. So Cordero Hodge, receiver for the Browns, not really probably well known outside of Cleveland, really had a really nice camp. He's been with the Browns for I think a couple of years now.
He had that touchdown from the drop in the bucket against Atlanta with Baker, right?
Yeah, he caught that touchdown on the drop in the bucket that we talked about quite a bit for a while.
Some people didn't like it.
A string off the live tweeter. But he has some talent. He can run good routes. He has some talent. He has some nice, ball skills. And he got picked up by the Lions. The Browns were really hoping they could stash him on the practice squad one more time. And he got picked up by Detroit. And as we all know, Detroit doesn't exactly have a established number one. I mean, Tyrell Williams obviously is kind of the de facto number one based on his career to this point. But there's question marks everywhere else really on that roster. So, I don't know for sure that he's going to be something, but I actually picked him up in our Cover One Dynasty League because that's a very deep league. Just like, hey, maybe I'll take a shot at him. So, from a cut down perspective, again, he has some talent. I'm not a big Jared Goff guy, but that's somebody maybe to kind of keep an eye on for the very deep leagues.
Yeah, Claves, I appreciate you, man. I have a sickness. Whether I'm on a show or drafting, I drafted my 71st underdog fantasy draft today. So it's a little.
You two are a workhorse.
Yeah, in a different sense. Some people would call it a degenerate. I may have a problem, but they have 1-800 numbers. I can get some help. It's fine.
You could have worse. You could have worse vices. Than,
correct.
71 underdog, who we love them as our sponsor, but 71 underdog drafts to this point. And, maybe a little heavy on the old podcasting, but, hey, we both have known each other for a long time. We do like to, hear ourselves speak sometimes. So I think it's a nice fit.
My wife would much prefer it than I talk to her. So it's great. She's fully supportive of it. She's a big fan. It's great. So obviously as we go through, like I said, there's not a ton of news tonight, but there is, this is the biggest draft weekend of the year. Obviously last weekend was plenty of drafts as well, but this weekend's going to be the biggest draft weekend of the year. We wanted to go through, we actually got some really good questions from Twitter and some of the guys who were shooting things into us. So I'm going to bring a couple of those up as we want to dive in and figure out, okay, how do we approach these things? The first is from someone who is a big contributor on the Cover One Slack channel and is actually an intern for us, Liam Kearney. He's done a great job with us. We're going to go in and take a look. Whose hype are you not buying? And someone a lot of analysts or someone that a lot of analysts are high on, but you don't see it. So who's maybe a name that you see a lot of buzz around, but you're not exactly sure why? We'll maybe start with you, Anthony. Who's a name that you see a lot of excitement and buzz and, people jumping to grab and you're not quite sure why everybody's on that train?
You know what? I pulled up that comment right before we went here. So Antonio Gibson, I still like him a lot, but I initially thought the idea of him potentially being a 3-down back, given, we've talked about him a little bit on the show, given his wide receiver background. Greg, you mentioned seeing him at the Senior Bowl and, he was doing like wide receiver drills.
He
and
had
reps.
33 carries in all of college.
Boom. And it was like, oh, can this guy transition to RB? And then when he did well at running back, then it was like, oh, sweet, look at this dual threat guy Washington has. And good old J.D. McKissick has just continued to be a consistent fixture in that backfield, especially on third downs. And he's so good in that third down role, his route running, his understanding of third down, goal to goes and yardage to gain, and just really smart in that way. Jared Patterson also made a little noise a little bit in that backfield, but I don't see him as being a threat at this point. But I think the hype for what people have for Antonio Gibson. So the comment I pulled up right before here was the bold prediction that Antonio Gibson will have over 2,000 yards. I think Antonio Gibson is still going to have a very good year, and I like him. But I thought potentially too, he could be a guy where we see like 1,600 scrimmage yards or some kind of scenario where he's putting up like 70 rush yards a game and maybe like 50 receiving yards and getting you like 5 to 8, catches, kind of like a Christian McCaffrey light type of thing.
People put it out there because of Scott Turner going as the OC into Washington that, can they use him? And people forget that 2019 season where Christian McCaffrey had the 1,000 and one of the greatest fantasy seasons ever.
Yeah.
He played 97.3% of the snaps.
Unreal.
As a running back in the NFL. Unreal. The man finished the season with 97% of the snaps. It's absolutely insane. So I do think projecting anyone to do that is, absurd because it's just almost impossible physically to do that. But when you have someone who they're comfortable with in that role, I agree. I think that I like Antonio Gibson. The calls that, he could have a McCaffrey type year is a little rich.
And I want people to temper the expectation too from seeing, like, if you're somebody who drafts Antonio Gibson and then all of a sudden on that first drive, you're like, why isn't he in on third down? And then maybe they get another third down. And you're like, why isn't he in on this third down? I don't see that as like a rarity. I think JD McKissic is going to get work and Gibson's still going to do well. I still like him a lot, but temper those. I think maybe the top 5 or top 3 upside that some people are saying, I think that needs to be tempered a little bit. And don't pull your hair out when McKissic's on the field on third down.
Rich, who's the name for you that you're hearing a lot of buzz about, but you're not quite sure?
Well, I'm going to kind of stick in the running back category as well. And there's, go back and forth. I mean, I've talked a little bit about Zeke and about Saquon, but I'm going to leave those two alone for the moment. And maybe somebody that's a little lower down the list that I still just can't get my mind around kind of where his ADP is right now is DeAndre Swift, still in Detroit. Kid has a lot of talent for sure, but again, that team to me is just not going to be good. They don't have a great offensive line. I think Jamal Williams is better than people think. So I don't even know that necessarily DeAndre Swift is going to get some massive carry share there, 70% or higher. I think Jamal Williams is going to take some of that shine. So for him to be going in the third round, sometimes even the end of the second round in some of these drafts, I just don't really see it with DeAndre Swift and with Detroit. So, again, I one of my strategies is I really try to, hitch my fantasy, my top 3-4 picks to players, not only that are good, but that hopefully are on at least, average teams or better. I really don't love hitching my fantasy wagon to a terrible team because things can go south really quickly, for a number of reasons, maybe not even that player's fault. And then, you're kind of out of luck as a fantasy owner. So, DeAndre Swift for me again in Detroit, I just think is overvalued. And it's somebody I don't know that I literally own a single share of him, and I certainly haven't done 71 drafts like Greg has, but I'm probably in the teens right now between Underdog and just actually a couple smaller drafts that I've already done before Labor Day weekend, and I don't think I have a single share of DeAndre Swift, and I much rather take some of the other guys in that ADP range like James Robinson, who's now came up there. Based on the injury, Chris Carson, who's been there for a while, Clyde, Clyde Edwards-Helaire is a little bit higher than DeAndre Swift, but sometimes you see them going pretty close from an ADP range. And I'm not even a huge CEH guy, but I much rather take CEH in that offense, obviously in Kansas City over DeAndre Swift.
No, I agree completely. I think that it makes a lot of sense and a solid one to question there. I'm gonna go with one that we gave Anthony a hard time about before. I'm nervous about Jalen Hurts. I'm nervous about the Eagles trading for Gardner Minshew and hedging to that degree. I think that there is a very reasonable path to where his rushing value buoys him as a fantasy asset and that he's going to be fine and going to be a solid starter and going to be there. I think there's a path where this Eagles team gets real ugly real quick. I'm nervous about the offensive line. There are almost no offenses where I own like no shares. I think I own more Texans shares than I own Eagles player shares. And I'm just super I can't find a spot where I would always rather have Chris Carson or whoever than Miles Sanders. I would always rather have Tyler Boyd or Michael Gallup or Mike Williams or Antonio Brown than Devonta Smith. I don't know. I don't even know who the tight end is now because now Zach Ertz is still there. I liked Goddard because I thought Ertz was going to be gone, but now I don't even know where that's going to be. And I understand but I've had some people stomp for Hurts as he's going to be a top 10 quarterback, and that I listened to a show earlier today about could he be a good long shot bet to lead the NFL in rushing touchdowns, and that
wow.
I'm nervous about and I don't think it needs to be a direct correlation that, they traded for Gardner Minshew because they don't like Jalen Hurts. It was a really cheap price. It might have just been too good a value to turn down. But it just makes me a little bit nervous in that, are they hedging because of what they've seen in practice and camp and want to be able to pivot to there? And prior to that, I don't know that I had any concern. They were never going to pivot to Joe Flacco because of the development and the reason that you would want to just give Hurts the reps. Now, there actually is a ripcord they could pull that if in week 9 or 10 things are going south, like, well, maybe we should see what we got with Minshew so we know for next year. And that just makes me nervous that they have a backup plan.
I want to add on to that with the Minshew piece. That one, we talked about it a little last week. It really threw me for a loop. So, you joked about, me with Hurts, and I still think he's going to have a good year, hashtag Undertaker. But as training camp has gone on, he's actually looked really great, especially that, the practices against New England where I think he went like 16-17 and just tore things up. And everybody was talking about how accurate he looked and how great, and video clips coming out of him dropping things in the bucket. Eagle fans were eating it up. And a lot of the reporters, just talking about how great he looks. And then you're still not getting you get the contradiction of like they're still not naming him the starter, and then they make the trade for Minshew, and it's just it's an interesting situation, especially like I've been keeping my ear close to the ground because I did like Hurts' situation, but it's really intriguing. Like I think I legit could see like a 50-50 shot where it's like Hurts is like a top 7 QB, or he's not the Eagles starter after this year. It's a very interesting mix. And when you combine it with, if the offensive line can't stay healthy and if they can't work those things out up front, depending on how Devonta Smith's, health is, and if Jalen Reagor can solidify a little bit, they've got questions around Hurts that will impact how he does this year. And then, you add that Minshew wrinkle in there. I don't know. It's even going into it, like not naming Hurts the starter. It was like, is it really like between him and Flacco, or is Sirianni just trying to make everybody earn it? There's a lot of, it's a very odd and interesting situation in Philadelphia, to your point, that I think the waters continue to be murkier than they are clear.
We'll mix in a couple of the live chat questions as we pivot back and forth between those and the Ask Cover One hashtag. Jamie is getting Josh Allen at the end of the round 4 the biggest steal of all time. Yes, obviously. I will say I do like. It's rare. I've hedged emotionally away from Bills players forever. Even in the trophy next to Rich last year, I had the chance to draft Josh Allen last year, and I still didn't. And now it's hard not to. Like it's the right choice to go after them. I still like that top tier of Kyler and Josh and Mahomes and Lamar and those guys more in the 5th or 6th round if you can. So. But in a home league, if you're playing around Western New York, you don't have any chance to get him at that point anyway, so don't worry about it.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about strategy quite a bit on this show, and I think anytime that you are, unless your QB has some crazy, point bonuses, whether it's more than just the 6 point for touchdown, whether it's maybe some crazy, 300-yard passing bonus or something like that, or the super flex leagues, like anytime I feel that you're taking a quarterback, any quarterback, Mahomes, Allen, whatever, in the first 4 rounds, I just think you set yourself up in a tough spot for the rest of that roster, because that's such an important round to grab. It's such an important round to grab, your number 2 running back, your number 2 wide receiver, even depth at one of those 2 positions. So usually speaking, I think it's hard to win when you do that. Now, again, obviously Bills fans, hey, that's a great pick though, man. 4th round, grab Josh Allen. Great pick.
So here's a question that
I know, Greg, actually,
if
you want, I think just because we were talking about, if you don't mind, I apologize.
How dare
you? Were talking about, where the vetoes question in the chat, the opposite end of the spectrum that we just started with, I think is kind of a cool one to follow up with where we were just talking. So, other end of the spectrum, guys that you don't understand why their ADP is so low. So not being overvalued, but obviously undervalued. And I'll kick it off for a second to give you guys a second to kind of think about that one. But at the quarterback position, I think it's hilarious that Kirk Cousins gets undervalued as much as he does. I mean, he is right now from an ADP standpoint, right there with Tua, Ben Roethlisberger, Jameis Winston, and actually my boy Baker Mayfield, who I can talk about as well a little bit. But Kirk Cousins is a guy that traditionally he puts up 4,000-yard seasons pretty consistently. So for me, I love grabbing Kirk Cousins down there because I much rather have Kirk Cousins, back what pick is that? Kirk Cousins is at 145 roughly. So that's the 12th round.
The last week, Mac Jones is going higher than him.
That's insane. That's insane. Mango White Claw is going 4 rounds higher than him. Joe Burrow, who I like, but Joe Burrow's going, 6 rounds higher than Kirk Cousins.
Well,
and
especially
Joe Burrow's never done that yet.
You're rattling off guys who don't run the ball either. Like, at least if you're going to, I can get it that if you're taking Lance or Fields or guys like that, you're banking on, hey, maybe they're almost as good passing, but the rushing is going to buoy them. When you're talking about guys who also aren't going to pass the ball, like Roethlisberger, like Mac Jones, maybe Lawrence has a little bit, but Burrow certainly isn't going to be running away with the ball. Are they really going to do more than, last year Kirk Cousins had 4,300 yards and 35 touchdowns. Like, if you don't have a rushing quarterback, are you going to get more than that?
No, and we all 3 of us have liked Matthew Stafford in the Rams offense. We like him. We've talked about him quite a bit. I have a good share of him in underdog leagues. I mean, Matthew Stafford last year for Detroit went for 4,026 touchdowns and 10 picks. So obviously he's going to have, I think we all agree he's going to have an uptick, especially in the touchdown department, for the Rams. But an uptick in the touchdown department is probably Kirk Cousins' season last year, 4,300 yards, 35 touchdowns, and 13 picks. Like, why is Kirk Cousins going 6-7 rounds, sometimes lower than Matthew Stafford? That just is crazy. It's crazy. I mean, unless Matthew Stafford throws for 5,000 yards, which I hope, because I have a big share of him in underdog. But, so for me, Kirk Cousins is a guy that I just, I don't know. I just think I think sometimes people just, not that they don't like him, but I don't know. Kirk's,
it's
Kirk's
not fun. That's not
he's
exciting.
A little quirky.
Yeah,
he got stuck in Washington forever, and the rant coming off the field in the locker room that one time or whatever. And I just think people kind of get that stuck in their heads. But he has Justin Jefferson. He has Dalvin Cook that he's going to dump the ball off to a ton. I don't love that he lost Irv Smith, because I think that was going to be kind of a red zone-y target. But he has Adam Thielen, so he has good. I don't know. Kirk Cousins for me down that low is crazy.
And I actually think he finished 11th last year. The only question I would have is, last year Mike Zimmer talked about how horrible that Vikings defense was. They invested a lot to try to fix it this year. He'd probably prefer to give the ball back to Dalvin Cook more often than what Cousins was chucking it last year. So the only path I could see to him taking any noticeable step back is maybe the defense doesn't put them in as many holes as what they were. But I also don't think the Vikings are going to be great this year. So I don't know that it's going to be way different than last year.
And I mean, it's not like Dalvin Cook had 312 attempts rushing the ball. So it's not like, he had 200 attempts or, whatever. I mean, Derrick Henry, I believe, led the NFL last year with 378. Just quickly looking at stats, I'm pretty sure Dalvin Cook was second in rushing attempts. So even if Dalvin Cook hits the ball a little bit more, I think your point is valid. So even if he gets the ball, it's not going to be some huge regression. So again, for me, Cousins is a guy that if you can get him late, especially if you pair him with, somebody exciting. Jalen Hurts. I don't like Jalen Hurts, but if you do, and everything that Anthony has said in the past could come to fruition from a positive perspective with Jalen Hurts. If that happens, and you can have Cousins way down there as your backup plan, I think that's a great pairing, and take advantage of the fact that he's going that low. So, Greg or Anthony, same question, obviously, to either of you.
I got one. I've ranted before about Mike Davis and Damian Harris and people that I like, and they're actually better examples of guys who, because of not me, but people around the industry, like we've talked about, have talked so much about Mike Davis and Damian Harris. They're actually not great values anymore. Now they're going with the other guys that are there, and now you're having to take them at the same time as Darrell Henderson, or at the same time as Chris Carson, or the same time as Josh Jacobs. And now it's like, oh, well, I mean, I liked taking a receiver in that spot before because I could wait a round or two later and then get Mike Davis or Damian Harris. Now, if I have to take him at the same time, I don't know if they're way better than Josh Jacobs. Like, he's probably a more talented running back than they are. So that's one where the timing of things matters, and you guys need to pay attention to that, because some of the articles you read, some of the things that are there, be careful with that drumbeat of where those guys' names come from, because the value might have been sucked out of those. So I'm going to pick a really ugly hold your nose pick for one. Brandon Cooks is going as wide receiver 36. There's no one else in that offense. He's being paid a sizable amount of money. Tyrod Taylor is a semi-functional, like, he's a professional quarterback. They're not rolling. This is not the same as the Washington football team last year, where there literally wasn't an NFL quarterback out there. But even in that horrid offense, Terry McLaurin put up some numbers. If you are the only mouth to feed in an offense and you get 130, 140, 150 targets, and those sound like crazy numbers, it's not obscene. Like, that's possible here. It's almost impossible not to produce and not to have. And now you're never going to want to watch them play. You're never going to want to, and you're never going to want to check the box score as the game's going, because there's going to be an awful lot of third quarters when he has 3 for 39 yards, and then you go back at like 7 o'clock and be like, how did he have 6 for 112 and a touchdown? And it's all garbage, and he's still super fast. And when teams start playing like prevent defense at the end of the game, he could take a slant to the house when it's 42-10 and now 42-17. Woo! And nobody cares except the people that had Brandon Cooks in their flex spot. It's just, he's the only piece of that offense. I got a couple shares of Philip Lindsay like in the 15th round, because maybe you stumble onto it if he starting running back super late. But Brandon Cooks, I think, is the one mouth that they're going to try to feed in that offense, and he's going so late that it's tough to. I'd rather have him than Devonta Smith. I'd rather have him, in that range than some of the other guys that are out there, Jalen Waddle and Henry Ruggs. I'd rather take a stab at him.
Volume is
Greg, let's just read the names of that depth chart real quick for everybody. Chris Conley, Anthony Miller, who came over from the Bears, Nico Collins, who some people kind of sort of like, but it's not obviously any, not established. Jordan Akins, Farrell Brown at tight end, and then Ingram, David Johnson, Philip Lindsay, which that's kind of sort of a talented-ish, maybe at one point in their careers, backfield that's just confusing. I'm gonna be honest, I haven't looked at him a ton just because of the Texans are so bad, your point, but everything you just said is spot on. And now in our draft, where this trophy, I'm going to now take him 2 rounds ahead of you in this draft. But you're spot on with that analysis, in my opinion. Yeah, he's going to get targeted a ton. Unfortunately, as a Browns fan and a Bills fan, we both know that Tyrod is not well known for his yards per attempt. So I think that limits him a little bit. But you're right.
But honestly, if you're going to pair that with a guy, it's a guy that you want there to be a little bit of yak potential, and that, if your downside is a bunch of 6 for 68 games that don't kill you, like 12.8 games, you can survive that. Sure. But if he takes one of those slants to the house, it works. And, you talked about that Football Guys FFPC draft you did earlier. He was taken after, Devonta Smith, after Corey Davis, after Michael Pittman, Jalen Waddle, Jarvis Landry. It's just in a range where, I don't know, is it crazy that he just gets so much more volume than those guys that it puts?
Yeah, no, you're right. Actually, I had that decision. I was up in the 8th round. I chose Devonta Smith because I think out of anyone in Philadelphia, he's the most potentially exciting.
It's a super similar
case. He's a rookie, but
it's a similar case you would make.
Yeah, if Jalen Hurts is real, I think Devonta Smith is going to certainly benefit a ton. So I kind of took the swing for the fence there. But I was actually looking at him as well as Landry, but I already had Chubb on my team, so I'm not going to take two Browns. DJ Shark I kind of was looking at as well.
Sure.
But again, I don't know Mingo Whiteclaw down there in Jacksonville. I think he's going to be better than what I maybe initially had thought earlier on in preseason. But Marvin Jones is there. There's some other options. I'm not sure DJ Shark is going to be the one he was a couple years ago. So I just kind of took the swing for the fence with Devonta, with Devonta Smith. But yeah, I mean, Cook's right there. I agree with you. I mean, Chenault, I'm looking at the round above there. Chenault, Cortland Sutton, Antonio Brown, Corey Davis. I mean, Corey Davis looked like he may be, valuable-ish because Zach Wilson's looked decent in preseason. But who knows what happens in the regular season? I'd probably rather have an established player like Brandon Cooks over Corey Davis, who went out a round higher.
Anthony, what's a name that sticks out for you that you don't really get why they're going so late?
This one is, I understand why this person goes later relative to his position grouping because he's a quarterback and there's many other sexy options ahead of him, or a quarterback as a whole, just guys put up points. But, we bang the drum for Matthew Stafford, but I'm not going to talk about Matthew Stafford. Ryan Tannehill, somebody who his EPA per play last year was so high. Somebody who plays on a team with if you want to compare him with Stafford, he's being drafted around, Stafford might have some games where, the defense does their thing. And so the Rams can kind of just sit and coast or, run out the clock a little bit. The Titans don't really look to have a stable defense. They're going to have to score. He's got Julio. He's got A.J. Brown. They move the ball. I also like the idea, especially for leagues where you've got 4-point passing touchdowns. Ryan Tannehill's a guy who can run the ball in, get you around 5 to maybe 7 rushing touchdowns a year. That's 6 points for you, especially in, with the added game. I think he's somebody who, I don't know, could kind of like fall backwards into 35 or 40 total touchdowns for you and a decent amount of total yards. And they run that read option and the RPO is really well down there. And he's somebody who I think people still don't when people see or hear Ryan Tannehill, I think they're still like, oh yeah, the Dolphins, like that's what they just think of him as and don't realize what he's done. And again, as we tie it into like strategy and things, I think it's awesome if you want to go early and get Mahomes or Kyler Murray or Josh Allen or, even Justin Herbert, Russell Wilson, all these guys. But Ryan Tannehill is like there as you start to approach the double-digit rounds, as you're there in like round 8 and round 9 and round 10, and he's just sitting there, and he's a guy who can be a top 5 fantasy quarterback and had multiple weeks where he was. And especially, again, you had the awesome point there, Greg, with Brandon Cooks and the idea of like garbage time and putting up volume. The Titans are going to have to put up points, not just because of garbage time, but just to like win. And they're a team with high hopes, correct. And they're a team with expectations and hopes. And in order for them to win the South, they're going to have to put up like 30 points a game. And they're not going to put up 30 points a game all just because Derrick Henry's going to run for 200 yards and 3 touchdowns a game. They're going to pass the ball. Tannehill's going to accumulate yards and his rushing upside. I think as I've started to get, again, I banged the drum so much for Matthew Stafford, I'm starting to like Tannehill a little more in that area because of the rushing yardage upside and the rushing touchdown upside, especially in 4-point passing touchdown leagues as well. But again, I understand why he's a little lower relative to his position, but that just makes me even more go early running back and wide receiver, and you can nab somebody like Tannehill as you approach the double-digit rounds, you're golden.
Yeah, I feel like Greg's point earlier with Damian Harris, I think, is starting to happen with Stafford. I've noticed he's starting to creep up a little bit as well as we get kind of closer to this main draft week. So yeah, I agree. Like Ryan Tannehill is a guy that kind of gets forgotten a little bit, and you know how they go on CBS or Fox when you're watching the broadcast, and they'll put 4 mystery players up on screen with stats, and you're like, oh, who is that? So I'm just going to throw out here yards per attempt rushing at the quarterback position last year. 4 quarterbacks, 6.2, 6.2, 6.2, 6.3. And if you would have, if you had to guess those 4 quarterbacks, I don't think anyone would have been guessing that Ryan Tannehill is in the same group with Kyler Murray, Lamar Jackson, and Russell Wilson. And then touchdown-wise, again, he had the same amount of rushing touchdowns as Lamar Jackson last year. So obviously Lamar had way more yards, but he was 7 touchdowns for Ryan Tannehill, 7 touchdowns rushing for Lamar Jackson. Kyler had a great year with 11, and then of course Cam, who RIP, I think he's now done with with 12, but just warming up my arm. That little kid came back, Mac Wilson, just warming up my arm.
Couple crazy things for Tannehill. I think there's a lot of assumptions that the new offensive coordinator is going to continue to be the most run heavy. What if it's just slightly less? People also talk about kind of the anti-fragility argument. I think it's very possible that Derrick Henry is just someone we've never seen before and is capable of an Emmitt Smith type career where it doesn't matter. You can keep pounding the rock and he just keeps producing. That is absolutely in the realm of possibility. But I think that when people look for, who's going to benefit from that out of the Tennessee backfield if Derrick Henry gets injured, my answer is it's not the backfield. It's A.J. Brown and Julio Jones and Ryan Tannehill that they'll just go, what if we don't have Ryan Tannehill pass 150 times less than every other top-end quarterback? What if we just throw the ball like all the rest of the teams? He finishes QB 8 last year with 120 less passing attempts than almost everybody else. What if he had 600 pass attempts like the other quarterbacks?
Heck, even 550. What if he even had 550?
Yeah, right? Just getting a little closer. So I think when you take a shot on Tannehill and go through there, and honestly, he finishes QB 8. He's going to QB 12. He's going right there with it's now a full round and a half after Tannehill. He's closer to Burrow and Baker and Lawrence on ESPN anyways, I'm looking at right now. But yeah, I had plenty of leagues where if I get sniped on Stafford, I just take Tannehill. And then, right there in that next area, I wait until the 9th, 10th, 11th round. I usually have some combo of 3 running backs and 5 receivers or maybe a tight end sprinkled in there. And then I take some combination of, I want one of, and I did this in the Cover 1 league last night and was talking about it as I was doing it, kind of explaining my strategy of how I wanted to go about it. I want one of Stafford or Tannehill, and then I want to pair them with one of Trey Lance or Justin Fields. And I'm comfortable going back-to-back in that area. If I've stacked up the rest of my lineup and I have decent depth at running back and receiver, I'm cool going back-to-back quarterback picks in the 9th and 10th, 10th and 11th, 11th and 12th, whatever it might be. And I try to get one guy that I feel is like a steady producer and then my upside shot. And I try to go with one of those guys. I like to get Field or Lance because I think they have the potential for that kind of Kaiir type breakout that if you hit them, you might not get it till the second half of the year, but you might hit on that rushing passing combo. But yeah, I think that's very viable this year. And I know early on I joked about the Josh Allen value question. You do need to be creative in matching up because the teams that get one of those top 5 quarterbacks, it is an advantage now. There is a gap in the amount of points per game that you're getting with that top end group is now a noticeable drop off that hey, if you're playing people that are getting 30 points a game from their quarterback and you're like, no, it's cool. I still got a top 12 quarterback and yeah, you're getting 20 and that all of a sudden now you're giving up 10 points every week. That's a starter. They get an extra starting slot against you because of the gap in quarterback. So you got to be creative. Sometimes you want 2 guys to play matchup. Sometimes you want to take the upside shot of the rushing guy who gets the job later on in the year, and you can get. I think Jalen Hurts had a couple of those 30-point games down the stretch last year.
And to tie him in with that Hurts piece there, just because you mentioned him now, and we were speaking about him. If you're thinking of the upside or what you like about Jalen Hurts, and you're thinking okay, round 7 or 8, I'd rather go running back or wide receiver there and then take Tannehill closer to 9, 10-ish where you can realistically and almost logistically get Ryan Tannehill. And you're almost hoping a really successful Jalen Hurts season is kind of like what Ryan Tannehill did last year and maybe a little bit before. So it's not as sexy, but Tannehill's giving you those numbers. And rather than reaching, I don't want to say it's a reach, but rather than taking someone like Hurts early, which people are doing because of what he offers you, I think you can get that out of Ryan Tannehill for several rounds later. And to your point, to compete with those guys who went quarterback earlier, if you're getting better value at your running back and wide receiver positions, you can offset what they've done if they're grabbing Josh Allen or Kyler Murray or Patrick Mahomes because your RB3 is better than their RB2, or your wide receiver 3 is just as good as their wide receiver 2, and you've increased your value overall.
Yeah, and not to pile on Jalen Hurts. That's not what I'm looking to do here. But if you
No, I wouldn't allow that. I mean,
if you look at Lamar Jackson's season last year, and I told you that, are you going to be able to get 1,000 rushing yards and 7 touchdowns and 26 passing touchdowns to only 9 interceptions out of Jalen Hurts? I'd say that's the more optimistic outlook. Like that's probably at the higher end of what you're expecting. And that higher end, Lamar Jackson was only quarterback 10 last year. So if you're now saying that, if that's the higher end of what I think Hurts could get, and I'm not sure he gets 1,000 yards rushing or 7 rushing touchdowns is totally in play. It's very possible, but it can be kind of fluky sometimes. Or the 26 passing touchdowns, so only 9 interceptions. Just it kind of puts it into perspective of what kind of season Hurts would have to have passing the ball to offset if he's not going to have 1,000 yards rushing. It kind of puts some of that into perspective.
For sure.
Looking to our next question here, we will go back to the Twitter and look at one that I think, Rich, you looked at when it came up about one of the gentlemen playing in an Apex League, which you've had the joy of playing with before. And it's in a keeper league. He can only choose one. Joe Mixon, DeAndre Swift, David Montgomery. Who are you keeping? In this scenario, we'll assume that it's equal cost of where you can keep them. I thought this was a pretty straightforward answer. Is anyone not taking Mixon here?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, in previous episodes of the show, I've been high on Mixon. I still am. I think Burrow, he's kind of shook off some of the, the trepidation about the knee a little bit, which is exciting. I think Jamar Chase has been, the bigger concern there. But, Greg, to your point, Higgins and Boyd are just fine from a wide receiver perspective. Still a little bit nervous about that offensive line, but I think Mixon's going to, certainly going to get enough run to be valuable there. Obviously depends on round. We didn't really get that piece of the question. I don't know if it makes a difference from a round standpoint, but yeah, I mean, all things considered equal, I would probably lean Mixon. Montgomery is somebody for me he's kind of intriguing. If Justin Fields ends up getting the quarterback position sooner than later, because I just think that offense will click a little bit more. But he's somebody I don't have a ton of shares into this point, so I would personally feel more comfortable with Mixon than say Montgomery. And obviously, you guys know my opinion on DeAndre Swift and Detroit. So I would probably rank those Mixon, Montgomery, Swift.
I was going to say, you're not going to go with your boy DeAndre Swift, number one?
I'm not. Maybe it's some bias. I'm going to go back to, I believe it was week 1 last year where you dropped a touchdown pass to win the game for the Lions, and they ended up losing, and it cost me. I had a $200 bet on the Lions that would have won for me.
Weren't they playing? Who was that against, too? Wasn't it?
I can't remember. I just remember swearing at him a lot in the backyard.
Maybe the Rams?
Somebody, I don't know why I'm confusing it with maybe the game the year before where they almost beat the Chiefs, but I don't think that was that game. Yeah. I'm confused.
Anthony, last year.
Did you go any different from that one?
I think Rich is spot on. Again, for me, those options right there, I think Mixon has still the highest upside, excuse me, and I also think he has the highest floor out of that grouping, just out of knowing what you're going to get.
Here's one that I've struggled with so far because I loved Kyle Pitts coming out in the draft. I do. I love him still as an asset. I love him as a dynasty asset. I'm still not 100% sure, and Brett kind of lines out the question perfectly here. What tier does Pitts fall in your rankings? Rookie tight ends historically offer little to no fantasy value, but he may have upside worth betting on if he is mostly aligned like a traditional wide receiver in Atlanta's offense. It's honestly, it's like Mike Ditka and Jeremy Shockey are like the best rookie tight end seasons ever. And it's really tough to hit on a rookie tight end. And I think he checks every box that you would want, that they have draft investment. They're lining him up like a wide receiver. There's not an obvious number 2 target share guy in that offense behind Calvin Ridley. We've joked about Russell Gage versus Azamadius Zaccheaus. And,
awesome.
How do we... I think I can tell myself there's a path there, but I can't bring myself to take him over right now in drafts, he's going as tight end 4 ahead of Mark Andrews and ahead of TJ Hawkinson. And I just can't. Like, I still like him. I probably have him next, but I would take Mark Andrews and TJ Hawkinson, who I both think are the number 1 target option in each of their offenses. So I have him in that, I'll say, second tier. After the top 3, you have the top 3 studs in Kelsey, Waller, and Kittle. I think the next tier is 3 guys, because I think there's a drop off before you get to the Logan Thomas, Noah Fant guys. That it's Mark Andrews, Hawkinson, and I'll put Pitts there, but I probably have him third. And the fact that I have him 7th, and the fact that I have him at the end of that tier, means I never get him. I just never end up taking him. Someone will always take him. The buzz around his name is so much higher. So it sounds more fun to take him. It'd be really fun to like stake your claim and hit on him and have him be the one historic rookie tight end. I can't bring myself to do it. We'll start with you, Anthony. What are your thoughts on Kyle Pitts?
If he can't break the whole rookie tight end wall, no one will ever.
It's an awesome statement. Awesome statement.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
He is the great hope.
Yeah, he really is. His skill set, this is the only thing, right? Like, for me, that really drills it home. One, Atlanta's defense is going to be terrible, so they're going to have to score and put up points. Matt Ryan is still a good NFL quarterback and can sling it and put up some points. He may be inefficient at times, but he can give you the volume. I like the fact that they play in a dome, and they have an away game against New Orleans, which is also in a dome. I like little things like that. You don't have to worry about weather. And we saw this fantasy offense. We saw what Calvin Ridley did. For a majority of the year, he was a top 3 fantasy receiver. He finished the year, I believe, he got hurt at some time, like top 5-ish, top 7-ish. And that was with Julio on that team. I think Ridley's going to see a ton of volume. And then my question starts to be, how much volume does Ridley see? And then does Kyle Pitts step into the Calvin Ridley number 2 volume role from last year? And then when you combine the volume with his skill set, I see why there is that upside. He offers so much. Good call. Risk it for the biscuit.
Nice, and Risk it for the biscuit is just a fantastic screen name. That is magical.
Tremendous. That also makes me think that it's my cousin, because he says that all the time. So I kind of wanted to be like, Josh. And also thank you for the super chat donation. Thank you very much. The rookie wall scares me. I mean, and Kyle Pitts, I think, is no disrespect to TJ Hawkinson, but is a different caliber of athlete and tight end than TJ Hawkinson was. But we were having the same type of conversation around Hawkinson when he came out, another guy who was a high pick in the first round, and granted, different scheme and situation. But the rookie wall scares me a little bit. I think what helps Pitts is that skill set and the volume opportunity of what he's going to see, combined with game script, where Atlanta, similar to what Tennessee is going to do, if they want any hope at winning a game, they've got to put up 30, maybe even 40 points, and they've got the environment and the scheme to do it. But to your point, I think he's maybe dynasty. We're talking about something different.
Oh, yeah.
But Kelsey, Kittle, Waller, I think are solidly in that number 3 range. And then just knowing what you're going to get, I like Mark Andrews there as the 4th, and I don't mind putting Hawkinson ahead of Pitts as well. And if you want to put Pitts up there, I think it's fine if I think Pitts is in that tier 2. If you want to make him as your number 1 tight end in your tier 2, I think that's fine. But I don't think he needs to be going ahead of the top 3. And if he booms, and then credit to him. But I think there's still that question mark. And when you have such the high floor combined with the ceiling of Waller, Kelsey, and Kittle, I don't think he creeps into that range. He's solidly tier 2 for me, but definitely behind Mark Andrews.
Rich, where are you on Kyle Pitts?
Yeah, I like Kyle Pitts. For me, tight ends in general, I'm of the ilk where I just wait on tight end. I mean, in the FFPC, it's a different conversation because you get the 1.5 PPR bonus for a tight end. But outside of that, I just usually hate my teams when I draft a tight end in the top 4 to 5 rounds. I just look at it and I'm just like, God, I usually don't like it. I love to try to pair tight ends later, almost like my quarterback strategy. Sometimes I do. So the Mike Gesicki, pairing him with Tanya and Greg, to your point, because he's going to get those red zone targets.
Gerald Everett now with
Gerald
that
Everett,
offense there with
agree.
Russell Wilson.
That's a great sleeper tight end as well. So from a strategy standpoint, the Hawkinsons, the Pitts, the Mark Andrews, just for me are tough to swallow. And I actually took Mark Andrews in the FFPC draft last night. Wanted Pitts to fall to me.
Sure.
In the third round. He went 2 picks ahead of me, so I grabbed Mark Andrews, who for me was the last tight end of the tiers, which we've talked about from a strategy perspective quite a bit. And in that type of a format, I felt I needed to do that. But I look at my team, and it's just not my type of team. It's just not my usual type of Rich Haynes, Burn River Sports team. Even though I think it's still going to be okay, but it's just, looking at it, I don't love it. So for me, Kyle Pitts, I probably will just also will be in a position where I just don't think I'll draft him because he's going so high, but he's going to be used as a wide receiver, basically. So, the volume and the targets are going to be there. He's going to produce, in my opinion. I don't know that he's going to shatter the kind of the rookie stereotype, or not even stereotype, the rookie history there for tight ends from a fantasy perspective. But I think he's going to get enough targets where he's going to be valuable. So I'm not going to fault anybody for taking Kyle Pitts high. I just usually don't like the way my team makeup, looks if I take any tight end again in a redraft, one point PPR, regardless of the tight end, in those first 4 rounds or so.
Yeah, no, I think that's spot on. And Charles I think some people have kind of separated Kelsey and Waller separate from Kittle, and I just want to remind people the last 2 healthy seasons that Kittle played were 1,377 yards and 1,100 yards, and the 1,100 yard season was in 14 games. So he's
the number 1 target.
He's the number 1. He does play a very violent style of football and is the best blocker of those 3, which does probably open you up to a little bit more injury risk. But when he's on the field, he has every opportunity to produce in that offense.
And he also really loves pro wrestling. So
I was literally going to say that, and he does the Penta Cero Miedo every time he gets the first down. So
Cero
Ferro. Cero Miedo. Oh, good times. Let's talk about wrestling now. So AEW, all out,
guys.
Sunday.
So we're going to need some comments on wrestling now.
We're going to pivot to Taylor here before we go back to the next question in Twitter here. Rich, I'll let you open it up here. An interesting one where I actually think somebody was the chat's been killing it tonight. Somebody had just put up here that in case you don't think it's possible, Ben Morrison brought it up here. Teddy Bridgewater supported 3 top 40 wide receivers in Carolina last year.
I will never forgive Teddy Bridgewater for not making DJ Moore more than he should have been. So I understand that argument, but I refuse to acknowledge this. I'm still upset. So
Rich, who do you like? Who gets fed in that Denver offense? And I do think the 3 names he listed are there because I do like Noah Fant a little bit more than KJ Hamler now that it's Bridgewater instead of Locke.
Yeah, no, I again, the chat's been great. I've been, loving to go back and forth in the chat a little bit with some of these side questions about the Denver offense. And I'm going to be honest, when that comment was put up there by Ben, I knew DJ Moore was good. I knew Robbie Anderson was good. I totally forgot that Curtis Samuel had a top 25-ish fantasy season last year.
He had a lot of rushing stuff, though,
to be honest.
He had rushing touchdowns, I believe, as well, that also affected that value.
He did, but he still had 97 targets, 77 receptions, 850 yards. So, it wasn't, a crazy receiving, season for Samuel. And Anthony, to your point, he did have 200 yards rushing at the receiver position, which is, I believe that looks like that led the league in rushing from the receiver position and a couple touchdowns. So, that certainly helped, buoy a couple of his weeks, which really had nothing to do with Teddy. But Teddy, it's not that Teddy can't produce. I just, in the chat, KJ Hamler seemed to have a little bit of a connection, in my opinion, last year with Drew Lock, because I actually picked up KJ, I remember last year, midway through the year, and he had a couple productive weeks with Drew Lock. And for me, just that decision to start Teddy over Drew Lock, Drew had I thought he had a pretty good preseason. So I'm kind of surprised at that decision there. A gentleman, Ben Albright, who everyone probably knows on the tweeter from the Denver area, he sent out a couple tweets just about the fact that it looks like maybe that direction for Denver could be, hey, they're looking for a quarterback next year, and instead of kind of continuing the Drew Lock experiment, they're just unfortunately over that. They're going to throw Teddy B out there for a season and then look potentially to draft a QB. But as far as this question goes, it's a great one. If I had to pick somebody, I would probably go Cortland Sutton, even though he's coming off the injury. As far as the number 1 mouth, but I think it's going to be a fairly even distribution because, again, to Ben's point or to Ben's comment, DJ Moore obviously was the focus, but I mean, he was able to feed a couple mouths there in Carolina. So I don't know that any one of them are going to be a huge separation from the other between Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, and Noah Fant. I do agree with you, Greg, that Noah Fant at this point probably is the third mouth. He's a separator from a talent perspective and athleticism perspective at tight end. If he didn't get banged up last year, I think he would have had an even better season. I liked him a lot last year, and I actually like him as a sleeper tight end this year as well. So, I would probably pick Sutton. Jerry Jeudy is a guy that I was a little bit surprised he didn't produce more last year, to be honest. So I'm curious to see how he does in this season. But I think the safest play is probably Sutton if you have to choose one of those mouths in Denver.
Anthony, what say you?
What say I? So I answered this in the chat before we pulled it up, so I guess I'll just read my answer there a little bit from there and pull it. Teddy, I'm so conflicted on this one because, so again, I had DJ Moore last year in my main league. Teddy almost refused to throw to him in the first half of the year. And then I also drafted Cortland Sutton last year, and he went down. So I almost want no parts of this question, and I'm still very emotional about it in many ways. I feel like Jeudy fits with Teddy's skill set, someone who can succeed underneath because of his route running and his separation. But then again, I also thought that with DJ Moore last year, and then Teddy was just going to Robbie Anderson all the time. So I think it's a tough situation. I think you could lean either way. To Rich's point, I think Sutton
real quick, Anthony, just to throw a stat out there for you, because you made a great point. Robbie Anderson, 136 targets last year to DJ Moore's 118, and they played 16 to 15 games, so it wasn't like.
And if you look at the share down, like I would say a majority of those for DJ Moore came like from week 8 on. He started to see like more uptick as the season went on. There were early parts, the joke was always like, man, DJ Moore must have like punched Teddy's mom in the face or something because Teddy won't throw the ball to DJ Moore.
And even more crazy, only 55% of the balls thrown to DJ Moore were caught. He was 66 of 118. That is putrid.
It was just, especially when we saw what DJ Moore looked like with Cam Newton and even all the other quarterbacks that were filling in, like a guy who was a high catch rate, gets open. Him and Teddy just could not work together. And granted, Jerry Jeudy's a completely different player and runs. I think he's a better route runner than DJ Moore. But I want to lean Jeudy because of his just explosiveness and how great of a route runner he is. He's, again, going into his second year. He might be one of like the top 5 route runners in the NFL. Like he's filthy as a route runner. It's ridiculous. Cortland Sutton coming off the knee scares me a little, but I like Cortland Sutton, and I think he offers you a bit higher of a floor because you've seen him produce at a high level, to Rich's point.
I think Sutton is the efficiency play because he has a chance for deeper targets, more red zone targets, and a better chance that, depending on how on target they are, he's going to do more with them. But the one point, Rich, you talked about how gross that catch percentage was. Take a guess at what Jerry Jeudy's was last year.
Catch percentage?
39.
Yeah, just like catches versus targets.
39%.
I'm assuming it's pretty terrible. 48.
52 out of 113.
Which is
46%.
Oh.
And not only on top of that, he was for PFF, he had the least percentage of catchable targets in the NFL last year. So sometimes low catch percentage is on the receiver in that, hey, you got to do a better job. For Jerry Jeudy, it was from, at least per PFF, it was not a drops problem. It was Drew Lock could not get the ball anywhere in his vicinity, and someone made a highlight reel of what Anthony just said, of these killer routes, and he roasts his guy and is wide open, and then the ball just it's not even in the picture of where he was when he was open.
That's why the coaching staff chose Teddy B. Then obviously this preseason, regardless of how good Drew Lock looked for a couple games.
I kind of think it was, and so I like Jeudy. I like him as a player. I liked him coming out of Alabama. I think there's a chance. The DJ Moore thing scares the crap out of me because this is the exact case you would have made last year, in that, man, this is the perfect guy for, Bridgewater's whole thing is he's Tyrod. He won't push the ball down the
guy
field.
is me. The guy you're describing speaking right now was me at my drafts last year. That was me. I'm that guy.
So this year, you're going to be scared off, and I'm going to profit from it because Teddy's finally going to figure it out that you should throw
this is all the Jedi mind trick, and I'm just making you think I won't take Judy, and then I take him in like the first round.
So now the thing is, I did like Judy a lot more earlier. He's been moving up in drafts. He's another guy that has a little bit of industry buzz and has moved up. He's actually up 7 spots over the past week on ESPN and went from 83 up to 8 spots up to 75. So now he's around OBJ, Juju, Chase Claypool, Kenny Galladay. He's in that range. He's actually going ahead of Cortland Sutton now, and that was reversed before. So not that dramatically changes it, but sucks a little bit of the value out of it. Now you need him to produce at a little bit higher level for it to work out. So I still like him. There's shots where, I like him a lot if I can get him as my wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 even. There's times where I'll, do the Rich has been an advocate of kind of the hero running back or the anchor running back strategy where you take one and then you just go 4 or 5 straight receivers for a while. That one's a nice one where you can take a shot on him, and if you hit and he does what we're talking about, but you have him in your flex and he's now getting maybe 70% of those 113 targets, all of a sudden now you're really hitting and coming home with something.
I would say him as a 4th wide receiver. I really like that. And agree, you mentioned the ESPN ranking. Our friends over at footballguys.com, even on theirs, he's up to now 70. So even a little bit higher than ESPN, which makes sense because I think the folks that are kind of paying attention to Football Guys consensus rankings probably a little more sharp than the general ESPN public. But yeah, he's right in that same range of player. Chase, Juju, Odell, Kenny Galladay, etc.
Went 5th in that Football Guys draft you were in tonight. He went ahead of you got T Higgins. And Judy went the pick ahead of him. I would still take T Higgins very comfortably over Judy, and him going that early, wide receiver 23 in the 5th round. You're talking about that is at pick 57.
There's too many question marks.
That's a lot of faith.
I was actually that round. I was really hoping DJ Moore that went 3 picks ahead of me. Yeah. I was really hoping DJ Moore made it back to me there, and then he, unfortunately just missed. But yeah, I don't mind T Higgins. I think Jamar Chase is going to take a little bit more. Looks like he's going to take a little more time to adjust the NFL than we may have all thought, regardless of the former connection with Burrow. So yeah, I don't mind Higgins.
I'm going to turn Charles' comment into a question. We saw what Bridgewater did with some of those quarterbacks last year, and the weapons that are there in Carolina. Is there any chance that Sam Darnold has a Ryan Tannehill-esque, hey, you got away from Adam Gase and now we figured out you're actually good at football, like pocket of value? Is there a chance that happens?
I think so. I like the idea of it. I like
Joe Brady is a really bright offensive mind.
And they've got weapons there. You add Christian McCaffrey back to that offense. I like the idea of taking – so how we've talked about the idea of Rich laid out this strategy early in the fantasy offseason. Greg, you mentioned it earlier in this episode, the idea of you take kind of 2 middling quarterbacks in round 8, 9 or 10, 11 or something like that. If you go early, like Kyler Murray or Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes, I love the idea of taking someone like Sam Darnold late because I think he can outperform his ADP and be a solid backup or bye-week filler for your stud quarterback, maybe even somehow be a trade piece to somebody who's not hitting. But I still like Sam Darnold as a player. I know as a person who covers the Bills, everybody wants to write off Darnold and say how terrible he was. I liked him coming out of college. He was my QB1 coming out of that draft. I think what happened to the Jets really set him back. I think he's set up for success. I like Dan Arnold as well as the tight end in that offense. He's got some pieces, doesn't have a terrible schedule. I like the offensive minds that he works with. And I could definitely see, to Charles's point, I don't know if I'm ready to sit here and say like, oh, Sam Darnold's going to be a top 12 fantasy QB or something like that. But I think he will outperform his ADP. I think he's a guy who can put, touchdowns together and drives together. And even if it's just a simple little, because you also got to think too, right? Like, I don't know, if he dumps the ball off to Christian McCaffrey and he scoots for a 30-yard touchdown, that's a Sam Darnold 30-yard touchdown. He didn't do anything, but Christian McCaffrey did things. And then you talk about the actual receiving weaponry pieces. Yeah, I like someone like Sam Darnold late. Again, also, we talk about value. I don't think anybody was really sitting here and being like, well, yeah, Sam Darnold. Everybody's still thinking of him as the Jets QB who
he's going undrafted in most leagues.
Exactly. So that's a really good, even if you could pick him up on waivers, like I would take that.
Week 1, there's, after obviously rooting for the Bills to beat the Steelers soundly, which, Rich is going to enjoy as well. There is no storyline that I am more excited about than the Jets having to open this season, that they have built so many really weirdly inflated hopes and dreams into, than to have Sam Darnold destroy Zach Wilson in the first game.
Well, I want them to succeed.
There is nothing I want more in this world than for Sam Darnold revenge game to just have Sam Darnold rip apart the Jets in front of Zach Wilson and have them just wash over them that he's done there in Carolina. I'm also a petty person, so that
I was gonna say there's a petty meme that's coming to mind.
I was gonna say, what's the petty is my favorite color?
Petty
I think that's
petty is my favorite color.
That's you. We've got a lot of pettiness this week.
It's been sneaking in a little more than usual this week. Rich, you had an interesting segment that you wanted to throw at Anthony and I with some games to play at who we like more at their current average draft position, something we can't prepare for, and I like that. We have to go off the top of the head.
Oh, I like it.
Yeah, so just kind of in the theme of question and answer, I will ask both of you fine-looking gentlemen some questions and answers. So I'm going to throw two players out, and the more bourbon I drink, the better both of you look.
Fair enough.
I'm going to throw two players out, and then I want you guys to have to choose one. They're going to be similar ADP. So we will assume 1 point PPR for everything.
Okay.
4 point, kind of the general 4 point touchdown, -1 for an interception for a quarterback scoring. So we'll start at the wide receiver position because it's my favorite fantasy football position group. Even though
you said we're assuming full PPR?
Yeah. Full PPR. Okay. No bonus for tight end once we get to the tight end position. So two wide receivers. We haven't really talked about either one of these much, so that's why I'm going to pick both of these, and they're very similar ADP-wise. Allen Robinson of the Chicago Bears, the Monsters of the Midway, or Mike Evans, former Johnny Manziel target at Texas A&M, Johnny Football, screw him.
Evans got him drafted for
yes, he did, for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So we will start with Anthony on this one. Who would you take if both are available and you need a wide receiver, Allen Robinson or Mike Evans?
I think I'm going to go Allen Robinson. I like the target share aspect in Chicago. The quarterback situation scares me, but I think Dalton is going to pump the ball to him. And then when Justin Fields takes over, I would assume he'll do the same. My bigger thought with it, again, the schemability aspect and the game script, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Gronk, Antonio Brown, the 75 running backs that they have on the roster. I like Evans' situation better for NFL football, but from a fantasy standpoint, I think the volume combined with the talent, I'm going to say Allen Robinson, who also, if Rich, if you want to look it up while Greg starts to give his answer, Allen Robinson had a really good fantasy year last year. He was a stud down the stretch, and he was part of the reason why I lost in my fantasy championship. Because he
10 for 103 against the Jags that game.
Yeah, he was very. I think a lot of people just kind of, I don't know if they thought he was cooked going into last year, but he's been banged up here and there in the past. But he played all 16 games last year, 151 targets, 102 catches. 1,250 yards, only 6 touchdowns. But I mean, when you're grabbing 102 catches and 1,200 yards, the touchdowns, don't really matter. So he finished, depending on scoring system, but he finished pretty much wide receiver 12 So that'd be a wide receiver 1 in most leagues. So he had a very nice season.
And I think you could see, if we're talking about touchdown stuff, I think you could see the Evans touchdowns regress negatively, but Allen Robinson potentially positively regressing in his touchdowns, and maybe bumps that up to 8 to 10 touchdowns, especially given if Fields comes in and he just starts pumping him the ball.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about one plays for an offense that scored 372 points last year. The other plays for an offense that scored 492 points last year, 120 points more. One has the greatest quarterback of all time throwing to him. The other one has Tom Brady. So how early Fields gets in would make me feel better about this, but Andy Dalton has produced some really strong AJ Green seasons in the past. I probably like Mike Evans equally to Allen Robinson from a talent standpoint, but Allen Robinson just doesn't have Chris Godwin and Antonio Brown, and that I think on the season maybe the stat lines aren't terribly different, but you are going to have some really frustrating 4 for 42 games from Mike Evans when Godwin and Brown both go off, and there just isn't that much to go around. You're also going to have 8 for 120 and 2 touchdown games that help you win the league, win the week, and it's going to be stellar. And I still like Mike Evans, but I think there's just such a higher floor with Robinson, and maybe the ceiling is capped. Maybe there's not there's probably a scenario where Evans can have a 12 or 14 touchdown season, and the Bears offense just might not produce that from Robinson's standpoint, but there's a chance they do, and if Fields gets out there early and really shakes things up, maybe that opens it up more. So they're both going in the range of guys that I usually convince myself to go another direction when they're on the board, but they're kind of at the tail end before you start to get into some of the iffy combo receiver groups where you're not sure who's the top Rams guy or who's the top Cowboys guy or they're kind of the tail end of that group there. So that's a good question.
Yeah, and the biggest difference there, if you look at their season last year, was, and Greg, you kind of just touched on, Mike Evans had 13 touchdowns and Allen Robinson had 6. And at some point, neither of you mentioned this, and it's probably because he might actually be a cyborg, but Tom Brady at some point has to fall off a little bit, right? I mean, I'm not even a Bills fan, and I don't even hate him that much. I think his Twitter's hilarious, but like at some point, right? So I mean, that I feel like that's maybe something too that makes me lean a little bit towards Allen Robinson. You made a great point on the floor, which I agree with. And then I'm kind of bigger on that with my 3rd or 4th round picks. Like I want a guy that's going to produce. And not have those huge boomer bust weeks. I talked about that with Tyler Lockett, which is why I'm not a big Tyler Lockett guy, because he traditionally he can really pile up stats in certain weeks, and then you're kind of in the desert in others. But Robinson's the
second least likable thing about Tom Brady after watching him be phenomenal for 19 years is now how likable he is in Tampa Bay.
Let's not talk about it.
It's just infuriating how funny and likable he is.
I mean,
Austin, did you see the interview he did the other day? Like we're talking, like
I'll talk about the defensive hits and rewarding and the game not being fundamentally taught. And
it was a phenomenally salient point, and I hate him even more now.
From the guy who also kind of created that, though, who every time he got breathed on too hard, he would complain. So I mean, it's a little, but I mean, I loved his point, but I found it a bit disingenuous, maybe. But to each his own, I suppose. I hate him.
Let me reinforce, I hate him a lot.
All right, let's move on, gentlemen. Let's move on to the running back position. All right, so Gregor, you're going to be up first on this one. Ready. Since Mr. Anthony took the first one last time. So a couple guys we've talked a little bit about, but I feel like we've kind of skimmed over quite a bit, and I think it's because honestly I don't think the three of us love either, but maybe we're wrong, right? So I think it's interesting to talk about them. So Josh Jacobs out there in Vegas, kind of going 38th ADP, and then Miles Sanders in Philadelphia. Those two usually kind of go almost back to back or within 4 picks of each other. So I'm just curious if you needed a running back and gun to your head, you had to pick Josh Jacobs or Miles Sanders, and then maybe squirt gun to your head if it's PC era, right? I don't know if I can say that anymore. You can squirt gun. to your head.
You know,
Super
I mean,
soaker. Super soaker.
I can't go with like the Brewster's Millions, Richard Pryor, like the none of the above campaign. I can't.
No, you cannot go none of the above. So Mr. Jacobs in Vegas, baby, or Miles Sanders in Philadelphia.
So, I mean, I talked earlier. I am just so morbidly scared off of the Eagles' defense. It's honestly pretty comfortably Josh Jacobs, and I don't like Josh Jacobs. I don't love him, but I just feel so much more comfortable that their offense is functional and that I don't love that they gave money to Kenyon Drake. That's a little weird that you spent a first-round pick on Josh Jacobs and still have him in his rookie contract, and you gave, like, a material amount of money to Kenyon Drake is kind of weird.
After taking Josh Jacobs in the first round just a couple of years earlier, like, interesting. And then you want to get Khalil Mack back, but that's a whole other thing.
Yeah, whole different thing.
Yeah, and it's not even like Josh Jacobs can't catch the ball. He had 45 targets and 33 receptions.
Like, solid.
Continue.
So yeah, I would still be pretty comfortably Jacobs there, and you're right. Like, I always can find someone else I'd rather have in that range, and but you know, as I talked about earlier, some of the guys I like now, Mike Davis, Gus Edwards, are, you know, Damian Harris are in a lot of drafts. They're on the board at the same time because Josh Jacobs is getting pushed down so far that he's almost becoming underrated to some point. And, you know, you're still talking about a guy who's probably in line for 1,300 yards from scrimmage. Like, that's valuable in that I don't know. Last year he had 12 touchdowns, and that certainly helped a lot. But he's, 1,300 yards and 10 touchdowns is still a lot of value to. Sometimes you could sneak him in like the 5th round now. So I think he's probably getting a little underrated. And, I am going to definitely miss out if Jalen Hurts has a functional season. I think it means Miles Sanders also has a functional season because I think he's for sure the central cog of that offense alongside Hurts in both the passing game and they've shown, obviously we've shown the read option, although sometimes you can vulture some goal line stuff from that. Overall, a strong read option rushing quarterback helps the running back more than Hurts because the linebackers don't know where to go, and you get a handful of those breakaway runs when they're overplaying the quarterback, and he gives, and Sanders is able to go in that read option. So there is a potential here where I'm simply going to miss out on a big Miles Sanders season. But talk about guys you don't have a lot of shares of. I do not have an awful lot of Miles Sanders. Anthony, where are you in Jacobs versus Sanders?
I'm in the Jacobs camp as well. Even without Kenyon Drake, the names escape me. I probably should have looked them up with my notes like I had, but I was just so, captured by Greg's dreamy eyes and his manicured hair.
It's the bourbon.
The backup running backs for Oakland would see a decent amount of time. I think Richardson and I forget who else. They would come on the field and spell Jacobs every now and again.
Jalen Richard.
Yes, thank you.
Dwayne Washington.
Yes, there you go. They look like they physically look like the exact same. They look like the exact same person physically. Like you can't tell the two of them apart. They would get some snaps. So you had kind of like a 3-man little rotation. I think that 3-man goes down to a 2, but Drake probably sees a significant amount of snaps more than both those guys combined, obviously, which hurts Jacobs. And I'm similar in that boat. I would kind of want to go somewhere else. But I would go Jacobs. I just think the opportunity is there more. I think the functionality of the offense, you have a higher floor than you do with Philadelphia. And also as a guy who owned Miles Sanders last year, and he was by far the best running back in that group and was explosive. And maybe you want to chalk it up to the ineptitude of Doug Peterson or the offensive line or whatever you want to do. But for whatever reason, he just would not get that usage that justified where he was taken last year from a value perspective. And then you go into this offseason and you hear that he's still got some of the fumble issues and some of the dropsies. And then you add in, as Rich has mentioned multiple times, how good Boston Scott has looked and how much they like him. You bring in the option of them taking Kenneth Gainwell and how good he has looked. You add in the questions about Jalen Hurts and what that offense potentially could be if that does not succeed. And that gives me a little bit of, concern there. And again, if you're drafting one of those guys and you're in that spot and you're going to take one, I'm assuming they're going to be like your RB2. And at that perspective, I still want someone with a higher floor who, again, has that 1,300 scrimmage yards, 10 total touchdowns aspect, who I think is a pretty safe thing for Jacobs. I would rather have Jacobs.
Yeah, and actually just saw a comment from Ben. I'm going to put it up here. Sanders might also lose his pass catching downs to Kenneth Gainwell, who had a really nice preseason. Boston Scott also is potentially a guy that's going to vulture some carries and or pass catching opportunities from Miles Sanders. I actually really like Kenneth Gainwell late, especially in dynasty leagues. Like he looked really nice in preseason. They were feeding him the ball and trying to see what he could do with it. So who knows? That could be a situation where by the end of the season, you might see a changing of the guard between Miles Sanders and a Kenneth Gainwell type player. So agree, Ben, with that comment. Kenneth Gainwell is actually a guy, and as Charles G put a comment out there as well, who are players that you're higher or lower on the most. I really like Kenneth Gainwell. I grab him late in a lot of my drafts. He goes undrafted quite a bit, but I kind of take a stab at Kenneth Gainwell. And I talked about Kirk Cousins a little bit earlier as well, who goes, fairly, much lower in my opinion than he needs to be going from a quarterback perspective. But gentlemen, do we want to do one more of these?
Let's do one more.
These? Would you like to go? No, this is stupid. I hate it. Would you like to go to the quarterback or the tight end position group? And Greg, I'm going to actually let Anthony choose this tight end position group or quarterback position.
I think we've done a decent amount of discussion on quarterback, so let's do tight end.
Let's go to the tight end.
Never mind. Greg likes the tight end, so let's do quarterback. No, yeah, tight end.
I also like a good tight end.
Heyo,
bourbon.
S-O-O-K-A-D-ho. That's Spanish for that's what she said.
All right, so we're going to go down. We're going to go kind of down the list a little bit. Again, a couple guys we haven't talked about quite a bit because I think we've, when we had the tight end episode, we talked about the top 15 or 14, and I wouldn't say ad nauseum, but we had a decent amount of analysis on all of them. So I'm going to go down a little bit on the list here. A couple of guys that I think have some potential that we haven't talked about a ton. They're going 148 and 153 from an ADP standpoint. So, Matt, I know, Gregor, you're really good at math off the top of your head. I use calculators. That is the 12th and or 13th rounds. So, again, probably either undraftable in some drafts or, draftable for 1.5 PPR tight end positions. But I think guys that we could discuss, at least from a waiver standpoint, Jared Cook out in LA. Obviously a little long in the tooth from an age perspective, but has had some nice seasons in the past. And then oft injured Evan Ingram in New York with Daniel Jones, Galladay kind of hanging around, with the Giants now. Obviously Sterling Shepard's still there, but he's had a couple nice plays in preseason. Barkley back. So Jared Cook, Evan Ingram, and we will start with Mr. Tompsett.
So, I've talked before that I think there's a non-zero chance that there's some value in that Giants offense. They did add Kyle Rudolph. They still have both Shepard and Slayton on top of the huge contract for Galladay. If Saquon's healthy, he does suck up a fair amount of those targets. I think that there was some weird buzz about like Donald Parham and other people, and the Chargers drafted Trey McKitty out of Georgia. And now the last week or two here, there's some buzz, kind of circling back around that, oh yeah, Jared Cook's the best tight end on this roster and Justin Herbert's his quarterback, and they're building some nice chemistry. There is an opportunity in this offense with the Chargers for whoever's going to get the third amount of targets. And some people like Josh Palmer, and I think that's valid. Like, that's totally a decent shot. There's also a chance that it's Jared Cook. And if it is, and you're ending up with the third most targets from Justin Herbert in a really nice offense in the 17th round or whatever it is, there's a chance that hits. Now, obviously, you're not taking him in Dynasty. You're not taking him in anything you're going to keep somebody in. But just on a one-year flyer, there is a way higher ceiling for Cook than there is for Ingram. So I think that there's at least a reason to take him there. With Ingram, you're just going to get mad when Kyle Rudolph catches the touchdown. And Ingram's probably going to get you 52 catches for 512 yards. And and there's probably going to be a 9-catch, 98-yard game in there that people get pumped about. But it's just, I just don't see the chance. I liked Ingram a lot several times. He's a crazy athlete for the tight end position. But just there's too many questions in that offense, and there's enough upside in the Chargers that I would take the upside shot there with Cook.
I hate to agree with Greg for the same, for all three of these questions here, but I'd also go Cook. I just think that the Giants offense has too many question marks holistically as a grouping, almost similar to kind of how Philadelphia's offense is a little bit. Like, it could really succeed or it could kind of fall apart. And then to Ben's point there, I think Cook has a much better situation in that Charger offense. I love, Greg, your point with Kyle. I could see Kyle Rudolph vulturing touchdowns, from a tight end aspect, in addition to, again, Saquon, Slayton, a healthy Kenny Golladay, Shepard, who Daniel Jones really likes. Like, there's just so many other mouths to feed there. And not that there's not with the Chargers, but I just think they're going to put up more points. They can stretch you vertically. That opens up things in the middle of the field. I like their weapons as a whole. I like Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, even, Guyton I like as well, a guy who can just burn and get downfield. I think Cook has he has both a higher floor and a higher ceiling than Evan Ingram, just because I think he's going to see more snaps, more red zone attempts, more scoring opportunity. I just think they're a much more explosive team, and they should be even better than they were last year, adding Rashawn Slater and then Corey Linsley at the center position. Their offensive line was not great last year. They beefed that up. They already had the weapons. Herbert going into year number 2. If you're going to take a late round flyer on somebody like that, I'd rather go with the old adage of, take the guy who's in the better offense. When in doubt, take the guy from the team that's going to score points. So I'd take Jared Cook.
Yeah, no, and Anthony, you touched on Jalen Guyton, who actually is a sleeper candidate. And I think again, Charles G brought that question up in chat. We haven't talked about him much at all either, but
I have him in our dynasty league. I like him a lot.
Agree. He's a deep threat. I know Greg likes Mike Williams quite a bit, and Mike Williams obviously is a much more physically imposing athlete. But Guyton's a burner, and Herbert can sling it. So I think that's a guy that you can definitely target. Again, put on the waiver wire list. I don't know if you even need to draft him, but put him on that waiver wire list of people to kind of keep an eye on that you may want to grab ahead of others. But, as far as this question goes, Evan Ingram, just from a health standpoint too, Evan Ingram's kind of always nicked. He's always banged up. He's not on the field. It's very strange. So I think he's kind of just living out his last days.
Weirdly, I think Cooks gets that rep sometimes. The last 4 years, he's played 16, 16, 14, 15 games.
Yeah. He had 1 year where he missed some time.
That surprised me. I kind of was thinking the same thing. I was like, oh. And, the last 3 years, Ingram is 11, 8. And last year, he did play 16.
But Jared Cook last year, tight end, number 12. So he technically was a tight end, 1 in New Orleans, 7 touchdowns, 500 yards. So I think that's, again, little up there in age, but I think those are potentially stats that you could see with the Chargers. For sure. All right, so gentlemen, that was our little Q&A session for you. So we'll do some similar things maybe during the season from a waiver wire standpoint or something like that.
Yeah, I like it. But tonight's been a lot of fun. The chat's been great as usual. A lot of good questions on Twitter, and I think that this was a fun way to kind of get everybody ready for the last big draft weekend, and then we're going to switch gears as we get into the regular season, going into more of a rhythm of looking at, you guys can send us trades that you're getting there. We're going to talk about trade targets. You guys can send us potential waiver options, which we'll talk about the best options. We'll talk about fab strategy. Do you want to splurge early? Do you want to save and have the hammer towards the end of the year? We're going to talk through all those kind of things as we get into regular season season because I always like it. We talk about the guys over at Football Guys. I always love David Dodds and Bob Henry. The guys over there have always talked about, fantasy is more like a table than it is just a draft, and that the draft is one leg of the table, but so is waiver pickups, so are trades, and so are the week-to-week lineup decisions. That's how you build a championship fantasy roster, and that making all those things. So it's been a lot of fun getting you guys ready for your drafts, but now that we switch into regular season mode, we're going to be there for you all season long. So one last thing you can do to get ready or to get into weekly mode is to talk about our friends over at Underdog Fantasy. Download the Underdog Fantasy app, use the promo code COVER1. You're able to get into there with a $10 deposit. You get $25 for free. If you jump in there and try it out, we have a ton of weekly contests coming up. You can do they have player prop parlays where you can do pick'ems of stats of who's higher or lower. You can do all kinds of different stuff where you can get into one-on-one competitions. You can do small weekly drafts. So if you get frustrated playing on some of the bigger DFS sites where you're going against some algorithm with 250 lineups and every variation of the top playable guys, this is a draft. One person's going to have Christian McCaffrey. One person's going to have Calvin Ridley. One person's going to have Travis Kelce. And you're going to go in and you can do 3-man drafts, 6-man drafts, 10, 12-man drafts for anything from $3 up to $500. All kinds of different options for you. So this is, in my opinion, a more enjoyable daily fantasy experience. I certainly jumped on the bandwagon with other folks early on. But I also got frustrated with losing to people that had 225 lineups submitted. So I like this, and it gives a fun angle to be able to look at it and still a chance to win some fun prizes. So take a look at it. Download the Underdog Fantasy app. Use promo code COVER1. Get yourself $25 free with a $10 minimum deposit. And I'm excited for the real fantasy drafts this weekend, for the ones for our home leagues, and to play with our friends and the ones we really value. This is what fantasy is all about, is getting together with friends and picking out football players we can swear at our TVs about. Any final thoughts for the people, Rich?
Yeah, and also, Gregory, the three of us have our own Cover One big league, our Fantasy Football Players Championship League that we will be participating in coming up this weekend as well. So we'll keep everyone abreast of how we do during the season. We'll probably share that draft board. So that's
when we win the $500,000 grand prize together, it's going to be a ton of fun. We'll share it with everyone. Awesome.
And if I ever would to do that, I would certainly. I feel like I'm a generous person. So any of our friends that comment often in the chat, I would certainly share some of that money with, because I don't know. I've always said that, and I want God someday to call me out on it.
To test you, to test
and I
you.
Would. I honestly, I really would. Yeah, I would love to share the wealth a little bit, but just a couple closing thoughts. For me, outside of that, is just also really looking forward to the regular season content, daily fantasy. I know Ben kind of put that. Well, he put into IDP up, but daily fantasy, I think we'll probably get into that a little bit with just daily fantasy stacks and betting. I think we're probably going to have I at least want to have a little bit of segment during our weekly shows about bets, whether it's NFL or college, and have a quick kind of each of us maybe pick a game of the week or something like that we're going to put out there. I'm going to try to put out my bets out on the Twitter, so follow me at Burn River Sports throughout the year, and I'll give you my record I hit last night on Ohio State. Looked a little shaky at first, but I bought the hook to put it down to 13.5, so I was able to take down the win and go to 1-0 on the season after CJ Stroud kind of improved there in the second half and got a lot of yak out of Olave and Henderson. So hopefully we will do a little betting talk as well and mix it up. But looking forward to the season, and good luck to everybody this week and in the coming days before the season starts in their fantasy drafts.
Another one we'll talk about here that is a fun way to approach everything. A group that we partner with called Tally Site is going to help us track all of our picks, everything that we have going on, and that way, instead of wondering who is the most accurate, who's the best people to look at each year, you can go in and be able to identify who the voices are that you should pay attention to with each of their picks for everything that we do. So certainly a lot of fun, something we're going to enjoy, and you'll be able to see our picks out there when we produce our show content on cover1.net. You'll be able to see our graphics. We'll be able to put them out on Twitter so you can see our picks every week, and that should be a lot of fun to be able to share a little bit more, like Rich said, from a gambling standpoint. And speaking of which, on Tally site, I was able to put out my picks for this week earlier today, and you can find them on my Twitter feed, and Rich and Anthony will have theirs out here in the coming days.
That we will.
Anthony, what are you looking forward to?
Nothing. Football sucks. No, just everything that, you guys have already touched on. We are, the regular season is about to start, which means fantasy season is also kicking off. Greg, I loved your, table analogy. I've always viewed like the draft as maybe the foundation and the framing of a house, but that's useless without the drywall and the roof and the finishing touches. And I can't believe that Rich hated my analogy so much that he just straight left the episode. How dare you? But yeah, it's, you start off strong with your drafts. And then I think, you mentioned an awesome point. The key is that maintenance, and in order to maintain and go through, waivers are so important, making obviously the right lineup decisions. And I think that's something that we really want to pride ourselves on here at Cover One Fantasy, the ability to be accessible, whether you guys are already subscribers to Cover One and you're getting at us in the Slack channel, or whether it's just a simple @ and a follow on Twitter and getting at us for late advice on a Saturday or Sunday morning, and who should I start, or what's the weather here? What does this mean? So on and so forth. I think our accessibility and, what we're aiming and going for here is really, designed to help, the viewers and the listeners, and, drive everyone towards success, as, we have, been able to offer some value here with this show and everything going forward. And it's time to get excited. We let off with it. College football is here, which means everything, again, is official. We've got real football games that, again, started last night. Rich mentioned the Ohio State game, and there was good games on tonight, on this Friday night. A crazy slate of opening games tomorrow and on Sunday. There's just good stuff all around for college football. And then the regular season kicks off next week for the NFL. And here we are. I'm excited. I really hope Miami beats Bama tomorrow, although I highly doubt it. But if they do, man.
Oh, yeah, Anthony, I wanted to ask you that question real quick before we leave. And sorry, StreamYard decided to tell me that I was done for the night. But
I made the thing that you hated my house analogy for fantasy football, that you were just like, I'm out. This sucks.
Anthony, man. Well, that's crap. I'm out of here. So 19.5 point spread. Bama versus your boys. The U matter, Anthony. Are you taking the points and the U, or would you take Bama covering 19.5 tomorrow?
No, I take Miami. I think Miami loses, but I think they cover. Especially I could see it in either one of two ways with Miami losing. Either it's close and they lose by 10 to 14 points ish, or things start to maybe get a little out of control, and then Miami, through garbage time, eventually gets back. They did that a lot last year when they played against bigger teams.
Backdoor cover.
That backdoor cover, that late bad beat type of thing from Scott Van Pelt, where you think you're about to cover and you don't. We were talking about it off air. I think the whole Bryce Jones versus De'Aaron King balance, Alabama's a better team, but I think Miami has the quarterback advantage, and I think the game will be close enough. I'm still taking Bama, but I don't see it being more than really like 14 points tops. I would take Miami to cover those points, but lose, unfortunately.
That's fair. And yeah, and like Casey, do you know the U matter? Is that, as a U fan, are you aware of all that, or is that just a Bernie Kosar thing here in Cleveland?
Maybe it's just a Bernie Kosar thing. I mean, it's clever. I like it.
Yeah, so Bernie. Obviously, Miami U quarterback. Obviously a famous Browns cornerback. Even though he's more famous than probably his numbers support, but still love Bernie. So yeah, he goes around and does like this whole charity thing with U Matter, and it's kind of cool. So as a Ed Reed Miami fan, maybe you can start to incorporate the U Matter.
I might. I love what Bernie Kosar does with the whole U Matter thing, and even just in the Cleveland area, like he's very active with what he does for the communities and everything that he comes from, whether it's Miami or Cleveland. He's one of those dudes who I felt like it would have been sweet if he got a ring. And I'm not. I feel like he could.
Technically, he did with the Cowboys. Took the.
Fair. There you go.
He And they actually let him take the snap and the kneel down there, which
That's
as a Browns
cool.
fan, I was like, damn it.
I forgot about him getting that ring. Same thing with like Rob Johnson getting one with that Buccaneers squad that won it in like 2002 or whatever. Just those little. I mean, again, but same level of caliber. Rob Johnson, Bernie Kosar, legends.
All right, guys. It's been a lot of fun tonight. We'll be here for you. Like I said, more DFS, more fantasy, more gambling, all kinds of fun things for you as the season goes. But it's been a lot of fun here tonight. On behalf of Anthony Prohaska and Rich Haynes, I am Greg Tompsett. You have been listening to Cover One Fantasy, and we are out.